2, 1. You're live.
We're live now. No intro music.
No intro still.
No. What are we gonna do for our intro music? You know, the other one's kind of ravey, right? Like I want to bring in some glow sticks and wave them around.
Mm-hmm.
I think this week in real estate, Tab, what should our intro, like, what should the feel be?
This week, because it's good.
The name of it is This Week in Real Estate.
I was going to say, the rusty trombone has been probably good in real estate for the last few weeks, but interest rates are down.
They are. So they are a little bit.
So no wah-wahs. You could.
I think I got one.
Dun, 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 dun,
like an intro to new, like a news.
It's like
thing.
a triumphant.
Yeah. And I can turn to the camera like this. I can go.
This week in real estate. Sticks.
Yeah. And have like side profiles of my team.
Yes.
And then just kind of do
this. Like
that'd be great.
Like the anchor man.
There's a NPR does a
news team assemble.
I can't remember. That's what NPR. There's a market thing every night I listen to, and if they do the wah-wahs if the market's down, and then I think they play the Saints Go Marching In when it's up. Depending on the day.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
I like that. So anyway, first thing, real quick, I want to talk about my friend Bryan Nale over at Primis Mortgage. Brian, friend of both of ours, fantastic mortgage lender, sharp, and what's the word I'm looking for? Not realistic, but actually he tries to help. He doesn't just try to sell you something. And of course I talk to him almost every single day and just kind of get the idea of, where are we today? What's going on? Cause it is so volatile right now. Mm-hmm. And having somebody that can cut through it and say, all right, look, let's put a game plan together and here's how you're going to execute this. And the other thing that I send a lot of folks to him with is maybe they have good credit, but they don't have great credit. And so he'll look at it and he'll go, okay, if we can get you up 20 points, 30 points, and then here's a little bit of a game plan to get you there. And, maybe you do wait 3 months and it's probably going to be worth it. So anyway, Brian over at Primis, friend of both Tab and myself.
Great guy.
Good dude. And that's who's done my mortgages here lately. And he's the man. So reach out to Brian, and thank you, Primis, as well. All those folks in that office. Got to meet them. They were actually, what was his title? I know it was Belinda and the
National Sales Director, I think.
I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
They were awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Very.
Chris Blevins.
Oh my gosh, your memory is so much better than mine, Trent. Good job, buddy. I think you're right.
Pretty sure.
And anyway, they're doing some really cool stuff and trying to grow kind of a grassrootsy way, not just by acquisitions and takeovers and elbowing people in the nose and that kind of thing.
Well, they landed a great team.
They did. They sure did.
They really did.
So today I've got my other friend. I only have 2. Well, I guess if we count Trent, I got 3. Talbott sitting here with me.
Short list.
It makes it easier for me to remember names though. So that's not a bad thing, I guess. So Tab and I got to know each other. It's been several years ago. When he was doing title work over at Gateway Title. Still also some good friends, some good suppliers, vendors, whatever you want to call it, for J Harmon Home Team. And we just kind of hit it off. Tab's sense of humor is very similar to mine, somewhat dark and witty and a little off the wall.
That's not what my wife says.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people call it weird, and that's just offensive to me. Yeah. That's just not right. But Tab has got his law degree, finished his JD, and passed his bar exam, and moved over. And you're now Centerpoint Law Group.
Centerpoint Group Law Firm. I know it's
Centerpoint.
It's very long.
Okay.
But easy to spell. So we compromised on that part. So, but yes, we didn't want to do the whole Farmer Talbott. Kind of, we were looking for something that was a little bit more broad and branding wise, and so, we are the center of Tennessee, right? Murfreesboro. And
your office is like 2 miles maybe from the marker.
Right. Sure. So we're like, why don't, Centerpoint, that kind of sounds cool. So that's about as much market research as we put into that.
That's awesome.
That's perfect.
That's awesome. Hey, slide the mic just a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk right into that flat part. I forgot to get. This is
right.
my fault. I
Well,
forgot to give Tab the
Well,
instructions.
Trent said I sounded
You
good.
sound great. I mean,
Yeah,
Okay.
well,
maybe
it's because
just a
he's
little better.
loud.
Yeah.
So now he's clear. Also,
Yes. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is better.
I got you.
How
How now, brown cow? How now, brown cow?
Yeah,
Nailed it.
Okay.
perfect. Nailed it. We were just talking about him.
Mhm.
So you've been over there. Has it been a year yet?
Almost. Yeah. So we officially took the lease over, I think, in February, and so yeah, I just
Partnered up with Dalen
with
Farmer.
Dalen Farmer. Yeah. So he's been an attorney. He's been at it much longer than I have.
Mhm.
Dalen's probably about 30 years, I guess, at this point, maybe longer. And we get along great. It's just it's a perfect little relationship, and we've got Shelby who keeps the trains running on time and all that, and I love it, man. I just couldn't be happier with what we do and what I get to do every day.
Now, what do you and Dalen? What do you specialize in, and then what does Dalen specialize in? So, as a firm,
Yeah, we're a little odd in that regard, in that we pretty much do the same thing, in that our focus is estate and business planning. So when I say estate and business planning, we're talking wills, trust, probate work for the most part. When we're talking about estate business planning, a lot of it kind of falls in that it's almost a consulting role a little bit. So obviously incorporation, buying businesses, certainly lots of contracts, agreements, helping people with those kind of things. Dalen has much better experience on the business end than I do, so he's a wonderful resource when we were working with those things. But doing everything from trademarks to, like I say, buying skate rinks. It's kind of all over the place on that. And with my real estate background, I do have a little bit of a niche there where I'm working with builders, contractors, helping them kind of get all their stuff lined up. HOAs, setting up HOAs, restrictive covenants, that kind of fun stuff.
that was
So,
the biggest eye roll I could give
yeah,
you when
yeah.
you said HOA.
Right. So
Anyway, love y'all mean it.
yeah.
Not really.
And then what I call dispute resolution. So with my realtors, I am getting a lot of phone calls. Hey, looks like the seller's lied on the disclosures. What do we need to do? And sometimes the answer is not a lot we can do, but I've had this one recently where we had really good success. So, so we don't litigate. That's what we always try to tell people. Like, if we're going to get,
What does that mean?
yeah. So if it's going to get basically adversarial,
If we're going to, if there's an actual lawsuit,
if we're going to court, we're going to hand you off to people that is a totally different skill set in that, and knowledge base in knowing statute of limitations, setting up, getting ready with the courts and all that. So we just don't do that. We've got great people that we can refer that to, but our goal is to try to keep you out of court. So if we can do anything we can to settle an issue that doesn't require, now we'll work with other attorneys that are representing the other side, but yeah, once it's in the, we're not doing anything, sue us. Okay. we'll send you over here. They'll take care of that part. So
gotcha.
yeah.
And that's you hear that tossed around a whole lot. Well, I'll sue you and I'll, and it's not as easy.
Yeah.
And it's not as glamorous as
or
it's hard, and you end up spending more on an attorney than you would get. Yeah.
I'll give you an example just recently. What I was talking about earlier. So sellers, without going into too much detail, sellers probably were not truthful as they could have been.
Forthcoming.
Yes, on the disclosure, and it was pretty evident, So we did what's called demand letter, admissions letter. Got in touch with them. I represented this would have been the buyers, right?
Current homeowner.
Yeah, explain the situation. Explain kind of here's how this goes, right? And explain the downsides to going if they want to just kind of plant their feet in the sand and not do anything, or maybe they just pay my clients, for what
to resolve the issue.
Yeah. And in that scenario, it worked. It doesn't always go that way, but in that scenario, it worked well. So everybody was, well, not everybody, but because like you say, you weigh the cost and you don't know what a judge necessarily, may be feeling like. And so I was thrilled. I told my clients, I said, y'all should be ecstatic.
I don't want to know the dollar amount or anything, but from a disclosure standpoint, when I have a listing, I always tell people, this is the number one area for people to
Absolutely.
sue.
Right.
Whoa.
Sorry.
Cool.
In stereo.
Cool.
So what was as much as you can say, what was it that they didn't disclose?
Yeah.
And how did you catch them in a lie?
Yeah. Well, the problem with this one, I mean, I can tell
because it is a lie. It's a lie by omission.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I can tell details on this one because I'm not telling names here. The seller represented that the HVAC units were 5 years old. The sellers had lived there since 1998. Okay.
So they would know.
And as within less than a year, both the upstairs and downstairs units went out. And when they went to look at the dates, one was 13 years old, one was 18. So,
so I have thoughts on this.
Yeah.
And it's already done, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It's
so
done.
I can
Settled.
share my thoughts. Did they not have a home inspection?
They didn't.
Because a home inspection should have.
Yeah. So this was last year when people were these are my clients were from West Coast, sight unseen, during that fun time when people were just throwing money out there. So, so to me, that disclosure is even more important.
Yeah.
Right. Because they didn't even, they have the right to inspect. They have the right not to. But
is there not? So, and this is where it gets weird for me because
what due diligence does the buyer have? Right.
Yeah. And I look at this and I say, so last year, if you were a real estate agent, you went through this, right? If you were an active real estate agent, let's put it that way. We did as a team, we did 67, 68 transactions, 65 transactions, something like that. And I think we had waived inspections on our buyers. Okay. So buyer side, we probably did 25, 26. We did more listings than buyers. And I'd say that we probably fully waived an inspection 3 times.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe. So we did them.
Yeah.
But we did the pass fail thing that TAR set up in the new contract.
Yeah. These folks didn't.
So is there not any, I don't see, I would feel responsibility as their agent as well.
Well,
unless they didn't have an agent.
And they did. And the fun thing about being an attorney, most of us can argue. We're pretty good about arguing both sides. So, so I have thoughts too, if I were representing the sellers in this, but, I think I think if had this gone to before a judge, I do think the judge would have had a difficult time reconciling.
Oh, it's a flat out lie.
Right.
Because the problem is they said, it is this.
Right.
If they had just even left it blank,
they didn't even have to put the 5 year in there. Now it was a concern for my clients. So I think they said how we'd like to know how old they are, and instead of just going out and looking at the serial number,
they're about 5 years old,
which was a pretty big stretch.
That's yeah.
And so I think in that scenario, they kind of knew, or obviously they must have felt a little guilty.
And if they were asked after they waived the inspection, then they would have just been like, oh, they're not even going to check.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, so that was in that scenario. It was great for my clients because they would have spent
like 20 grand.
Yeah. What they got would have been, if they would have even gotten that, right, would have been cut in half with attorney fees, So, so yeah, so we do that kind of stuff, but mainly that is not what I do. Mainly it's, I do what I like to, I guess it's not happy stuff, but it's the, it's the more straightforward,
before punches are thrown.
We like to do the nerdy stuff, right? Like we like to do,
that shoe fits.
Yeah, right. It does. So estate, we're estate planning, business planning. How does it affect your taxes? How does this fit into your overall strategies? That kind of thing. We're not, you know, we're not the we will fight for you guys. That's not what we do. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So you told that one. Give me another crazy story. What's the craziest thing you've run into so far?
Oh, geez. I don't know if I want to. I mean, I've got some crazy ones, but I don't know if I want to talk about them. To be frank.
Like, do you need counseling?
No,
over
not that. Just,
yeah.
I mean, without getting it. I mean, you know, it's funny. When I started, I thought it would be pretty boring, right? Like, okay, yeah, wills, trust, probate, right? Business people. And you find quite quickly that people are fascinating, right?
Yeah.
And so because we're still dealing with people, there's still, you know, kind of weird stuff, even in this, you know. So, you know, there's preachers that have children outside of marriages and they didn't pay their child support. And so then they die. And then so then you represent the
surprise.
Yeah. So you represent the child.
Yeah.
Right. In a probate matter, you know,
yeah.
There's that kind of stuff out there. You know, and other things, but for the most part, I will say, for the most part, my clients are, you know, there's particularly in estate planning, you pretty much you're coming to me. One, you're typically coming to me because you had a vacation or you went to the hospital. So it's one of the two.
Vacation.
Yeah. People, they go on before they go on a vacation or right after, they have the thought, oh my God, what if
the plane crashes or I get stuffed in a trunk in Bermuda or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I go to Rio de Janeiro and my kidneys are, you know, out,
harvested.
You know, right.
Yeah.
So you get those, or they've been to the hospital, whether it was for a loved one or themselves. So those are the two trips that typically will get people in to see me. And typically you're in two places in life. So you either just had the kid and okay, we know we need to deal with this, you know, who's going to take care of the kid, that kind of thing. Or they're in that, I would call that, let's call it the late fall of life, you know. So kids are now grown up, right? We're in our 60s. The kids are good kids.
Thank God I've made it this far, but
yeah. And maybe I did estate planning, but I need to update it
25 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I've never done it. And now I know is the time to do that. So
what are when, all right, 43 years old.
Yep.
Got two of my own kids, just got married, got two step kids. Right. I walk into your office and I say, all right, Tab, I had a will done 15 years ago. Life is very different now than it was then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fix me.
Well, so blended families are some of my favorite people to work with
because they're more expensive, because they're harder.
Well, it can be, but the reason I like it a little bit more, a lot of times they go in having no clue how things go without a will or a trust in place. Our laws, the way it's just written, I mean, if you pass with property in a blended family, it gets very interesting on how that property is to be dispersed, and it's typically not at all what people assume or think. So when I talk to blended families about how that works, it gets their attention a lot, and they're like, oh my God, we definitely need to do something. The second part is we like to build in provisions as well. Hey, you know, what happens if one of you passes and the other one gets remarried? Right?
Yeah.
How do we kind of protect your children? Right. So we have that conversation, and sometimes it makes sense to go the full trust route in those scenarios. Sometimes we don't have to do that, but we build a lot into the will itself that kind of puts those provisions in there. So blended families are really, I say, fun to work with. For the most part, they are, but
they're challenging. And
yeah, it's a little challenging, and I do feel like they're very appreciative. You know, it's a little different than, you know, like Lane and I with 2 kids, right? Like,
All right,
okay,
so-
just give me the will. I know.
So I'll
right?
give you, for example. So Lacey and I just got married. If I and I have a couple of rental houses.
Mhm.
If I die,
Yeah,
the rental houses
Yeah.
don't go to Lacey automatically. Is that correct?
Not
unless I've done.
not if they're only in your name.
Unless
Yeah.
I've done the work to make that happen.
Yeah. So if it's just owned by Jonathan Harmon, those properties would be divided between Lacey and your children.
So she does get.
She does.
Some. Okay. Well,
she
that's
gets,
good.
Depending on how many kids,
Mhm.
she can elect to get up to 40%.
Okay.
She can't get any more than
Even
that.
if she wasn't on the
unless
the
there's
title.
just one kid. Correct. She is by law without a will, right?
Correct.
By law, she is entitled to what we call a child share is essentially what is how we say that. So, so again, with 2 children, she's entitled up to 33%, basically. Or, I'm sorry, she's entitled automatically to 33. She could elect to go more. She can also disclaim it. She can say, just let
Let the kiddos have it.
Jonathan's kids have it. It's all part of a process, but yes. So sometimes that surprises people because they either assume my kids get it all or my spouse gets it all.
But if we've lived there together as a marital home,
Well, it depends on who's on title still, right?
mhm.
So sometimes people get confused between like death issues and divorce issues, right?
Mhm.
So the marital home, regardless of who's on title, right? Each spouse has interest in a marital home by default.
And it's 100%. Is that correct?
Well, that depends on how you own it, right? I mean, if it's tends by an entirety, husband and wife kind of thing. But we all have, if we're married and we live in a home together, we all have marital interest. Okay. Regardless if we're on title or not. So such as you can't kick me out, right? You may not like me anymore, but until you get divorced or separation,
Right.
this is my home. Okay. And I'm entitled to live here. Even if I'm not on title. Okay. If we get divorced and I was never on title, but a judge could be convinced that, Your Honor, I contributed to this marital home, whether it was through sweat equity or time, money,
paying bills,
right?
whatever. Yeah.
I contributed, therefore I should be rewarded some of this. And they're going to look at how long you're married and other factors to that. Again, regardless if you're on title or not, because it was the marital home. Death is different. We don't look at those factors. It's just the law. The law says at death, if your marital home, if only one of you was on title, okay, and that person that's on title dies, the law says very clear. It's to be split between the kids, your children, not the stepkids, your children and the spouse.
Wow.
That's just all there is to it.
So if that's not what you want,
right,
then you need to have a will in place.
Yes, at minimum a will. And for blended families, a lot of times we do get into, a lot of times a trust can make a lot more sense.
All right. So I'm glad you brought up trust.
Yeah.
I saw where we get all of our information these days. I saw a quick Facebook video the other day.
Yeah. So informative. So, always accurate.
Always accurate.
So I pretty much make all my life decisions based on
Facebook
reels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reels these days.
That's what this was.
Yeah. So that and the 8-ball. I just shake
the magic 8-ball,
right.
not an 8-ball as in
I don't know that
drugs
kind.
or
sorry, that's
okay.
not. I don't.
Just to clarify,
I'm not a criminal attorney. So remember,
not a
nerds.
criminal attorney.
We are the
or
nerds.
a criminal.
Yeah, remember,
attorney.
We're the nerds of law, right?
Yeah.
Just remember that.
So, in a trust, I guess do this. Let's go this route. What are some common misconceptions of a trust?
Mhm.
And then what do we actually use them for? Because the video that I saw basically said that grandma's got a house and grandma sets up a trust for a grandchild. And when grandma dies, there is no capital gains responsibility at all. And I think that the basis of it was, because there's still not, because you get stepped up tax basis if you sell all that stuff. But I think the basis of it was that the house has gone over the $500,000 limit. So there's going to be some capital gains responsibility.
Right. For the primary. Right. Now, if grandma owns investment properties, we've still got capital.
That's a whole
gains.
different. Yeah.
But, well, let me answer the question. Misconceptions, right? golly, I think
Are trusts just for rich people?
yeah, that's probably is the number one misconception, right? Like that just they're very complicated, and that's what rich people do, right? And I would say for the most part, that's not true. And the reason I would say that is you might be surprised on the cost of a trust. Does a trust cost much more than a will? Absolutely.
To set up.
Yes, absolutely. But if you're like me and you like a good deal, the advantages you could procure from the step up basis, which we can talk about a little bit, and in the end, where your estate is not going to be subject to probate, so you don't have to go back to an attorney like me and pay me a few $1,000s to do. It can actually save you a lot of money in the long run. And I would say for the most part, they're not complicated once we get it set up. The number one reason trust, I don't want to say fail because they don't really fail, but a lot of times
they don't do what you think that they're supposed to.
Yeah, right. So they fail, and the objective is because we don't fund them properly. So if we take this coffee mug, if you're listening, we have a coffee mug here, and you think of the coffee mug as the trust, the coffee mug is only as good as what we put in it. So if we fail to put our assets in the mug, then they, depending on what kind of assets they are, then they could be subject to probate, which means we kind of screwed up the purpose of it. A good attorney will, as part of the process, we're going to make sure that we've addressed every single asset that you own at that time. And we're going to get them put into the trust or labeled appropriately so that we avoid probate at all costs. Now, what the client does over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I can't control. All I can do is preach and say, listen, if you buy a piece of property, if you go buy an RV, right, you need to have it in the trust. If not, it's going to go through probate, which kind of screws up, the point.
Now you're doing both.
Yeah, right. Which it screws up kind of the point of it. So that's probably, but really it's not, once you get them set up, you're not going to notice as a person any change in your day-to-day life. If we're doing a living trust, okay. And we're getting into jargon here, but living trust or a revocable trust versus an irrevocable trust, those are quite different. Those are generally for people that are very, very high net worth. So right now, federal inheritance tax level is 12.6 million. Okay. So that's going to exclude a lot of us. But if you are at that point, we probably do want to look at an irrevocable trust. Reason being, without that, our inheritance tax goes 40% for every dollar over that 12.6 million. So that's quite a bit. If we can put that in irrevocable, we can avoid that.
But at that point, it's its own entity, right?
Well, it's so is a living trust. What the big difference is, you give up the power. You have to appoint a trustee that's somewhat of an independent party that manages that. So most people are not going to be interested in that
because you got to pay them. There's essentially a maintenance fee.
Unless you can find just some person that's willing to act in that role, and that can be hard because a lot of times the people that would do that are probably going to be beneficiaries of our estate anyways, right?
Or have an interest about the beneficiaries and may die at the same time that
yeah. So but if you're worth 30 million, it's worth doing, right? So we rarely are doing a lot of those. What we're typically talking about is what we call living trust. So you have full control. You don't even have to have a separate taxpayer ID for these things. You're Jonathan Harmon. It just so happens that you're the trustee and the beneficiary of your own trust, and it is an entity. So that's how we're able to avoid probate, because what happens is the trust lives beyond you. So you may die as the trustee. Guess what? We just move who's the next trustee in line. And that's all we're doing. We're just going to the next one.
So what would be a trigger for someone to start thinking about a trust? I'm 25 years old. I have my first house, and I just had a baby. Is that a trust?
Yeah, it would probably be overkill. right?
I'm 43 years old. I've got 4 rental properties, and net worth is well below the 12 point whatever million, way below that. But there's some assets there. Got a couple of kids.
Right.
They're teenagers, whatever.
Yeah.
Is that a trust?
I would love to trust, and here's why. And this is me personally too. I love the trust in that regard because of the real estate aspect.
What if I only have one house? Just our home.
Yeah, if it was a blended family, I might still consider it.
And there's a lot of blended families.
Yeah. But maybe not. Maybe still a little overkill at that point. But if you've got multiple real estate holdings, or you got that house in Gulf Shores,
our small business.
Yeah. All those. There it is again.
What are you doing to us, Trey?
It's like I'm and then you hear yourself, you're like, I sound more handsome than that,
in my own head.
Yeah, right. So nasally. Where were we?
We're in Gulf Shores.
Right, Gulf Shores. Real estate, I like real estate holdings and trust, and 2 main reasons. Reason 1, something happens to me. Okay, just me, right? The trust owns everything. All right, I'll use my personal situation. My wife couldn't even tell you where our properties are. She could care less, right?
It's not her part of the relationship.
No. Like Tab, you do that. I trust you, all that kind of stuff. So, Tab drops dead of a heart attack because of really poor lifestyle decisions that he's made over.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And so Lane is now stuck with these properties that she really doesn't want anything to do with. Lane, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, can say, you know what, I'm going to sell these properties right now. The market's done very well. We can make quite a bit on these, and I'm not going to pay the capital gain on that.
Because she's got, and for those of you that are just watching, that stepped up tax basis means that Tab bought them 4 years ago. They cost this much, and now they've grown to this much. Well, now she gets it, and she gets it at
my date of death,
at the moment that Tab drops dead of bad lifestyle decisions.
Right.
That's the value that starts.
Correct. So when she sells it, right? So the value she's only going to pay the value increase from when I drop dead to when she sells. Without that being in the trust, she would not get that advantage. If we just owned it as husband and wife,
only on the marital home.
Correct. Only on the marital home. Right. So I'm talking about the investments. She doesn't get that. She just doesn't get it.
I didn't know that.
She has to pay the gain. Okay.
From when I bought it.
Correct.
Or from when
we bought it. Right. So she pays the gain on that. That's a pretty, 20% hit. Right.
It could be.
Right. So that's a good reason. Second reason, we don't have to probate it, right? So again, there's no having to open up a probate matter and having a judge bless
have any say so whatsoever.
What we need to do with this property. So that would be very advantageous for us who have 8-year-olds, right? So we have twins. That's why I say 8-year-olds. I don't need 8-year-olds owning property, right? So the trust owns the property. So if Lane and I fly Allegiant Air and they miss the runway in Key West again, but this time they hit the ocean. True.
You were on that plane?
No, I was on a plane. They missed the runway. We were flying into Key West and he just missed it. So we had to go back up and he apologized and we tried again.
He was probably on his phone. Yeah.
And
don't text and fly.
Yeah, that flight got canceled on the way back. It was crazy. We hitchhiked back to Miami. It was a fun trip.
You're such a hippie.
Well, we didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I don't have time to tell you that story. So yes. So if something happens to both of us, wow, how nice is that to be in a trust? Because now literally all that's going on there is my trust, our successor trustee steps in our shoes, manages those properties for the benefit of my kids. So the trustee can say, yeah, we'll just keep renting it. They're doing well, or yeah, let's just sell it. Okay. And the title company, all the title company needs is death certificates.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need anything because the property's still in the trust. It
doesn't change anything as far as the process for buying or selling either, right?
Right. So the trust
just got to name the right person on the
trust can continue to buy, continue to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have to get into where, a child is now an owner of property, but they have to have a guardian ad litem appointed or something to manage that. We don't have that situation. So, so those are great. I love them for that. I also love them for people if they have children that they're not real sure about, maybe some dependency issues, not a real stable lifestyle. I have clients that like to do trust for that reason.
And hope that they get their acts together.
Yeah, and they can put a lot of caveats, that way
Mm-hmm.
in how the money is to be distributed if they're passed. So that can be an attractive reason to do it. I also have a lot of clients that just hate the idea of probate. So they've been through it. It wasn't a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
So they just kind of want to avoid it. And so those are typically my people that want to set up a trust. So the other thing I'll say, powers of attorney are critical too. They're part of any estate planning package, but we don't often think about them. Sometimes I have said this many times. I'll have people come to me and they'll kind of tell me their situation. I'll tell them, like, honestly, you probably don't need a will. It's not really going to change.
That's one of my questions.
Yeah.
So who doesn't need a will?
Well, I don't say, okay, a married couple with no children, no plans of having any children, and they're totally fine with the other one just getting everything. Yeah.
But don't they eventually need a will? I mean, that's great if one dies and then the other one can write a will. Because what happens if they both die at the same time? Who gets the...
Right. They got to be fine with siblings, mom and dad, siblings splitting everything up.
But if they have a will,
they can direct it however they want.
Nobody has to sort it out.
Right. So is it good that everyone should have one to make it clear? Yes. But sometimes it doesn't really, the outcome isn't going to change really than what they already wanted. Right. But what I will say, so these are typically my people that are pretty young, and when I say pretty young, late 20s, early 30s types. Right. And they just kind of want to do the right thing. And I appreciate that. And, and we will build them, I'll say, look, if you have, we will put it in here. If you have kids, whether, by birth or adoption, we can account for that now. We can go ahead and build that in. So, but what I will say is what I really want you to have is powers of attorney, because we could all get in a situation where we need that. Incapacitation, right?
Incarcerated.
Yeah, right.
Trapped in Key West.
Sure, yeah, right. All those things are legitimate reasons that you may want to have a power of attorney. And so healthcare power of attorney and the general power of attorney. So oftentimes I'll say, look, the will, maybe not, but please get powers of attorney done, because we're all going to be there at certain point and want that. And if you don't have it and you're incapacitated, the only way you can have somebody else make decisions is with conservatorship.
Yeah. And then you got to prove that person's actually incapacitated.
And that is a big step and lots of fees, for that kind of thing. So,
and time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I tell everybody, please, if you have nothing else, get the powers of attorney. So, and you can get some of this stuff, like powers of attorney. I don't want to, encourage it necessarily, but those are pretty template stuff, so not to give away the secret sauce, but you can find those things readily available online, and for the most part they'll work.
I say, but you really need to make sure.
The problem is
they are somewhat state specific, right?
Yeah, and the problem is you don't, is it a springing power of attorney? Is it not? What's a springing power of attorney? Well, ask an attorney, right? Is there a sunset on these things? And
it's just not that expensive.
It's not
for a little bit of plan. I mean,
I don't
you spend more
so.
than that on insurance, and this is probably more useful than your insurance.
Yeah. And in some ways that's what estate planning is.
It is,
right. It's just kind of, if you think of it as insurance in a way, it's ensuring that, the things that you want done get done.
Mhm.
It's not a bad analogy. I mean, they're obviously different what they do, but that is kind of what it's peace of mind,
Mhm.
right? That's what you're really paying for when we're talking about estate planning.
Well, man, this has gone fast. You're
Exciting stuff.
You're excellent.
I've talked a lot, so
That's okay. That's good. That's what attorneys do.
yeah, it's true.
All right. One thing that as a homeowner, from your perspective, that I can do to protect myself legally, anything. Open question.
I love umbrella policies.
What's that?
So these are typically pretty cheap policies that you can get through
insurance policies.
Yes, this is an insurance policy. It is personal liability protection that, well, I think that sums up what it is. But if you get sued
for anything,
yeah. Now, couple a little with all insurance,
not criminal activity,
right? Like reckless, knowing,
right?
Wanton behavior kind of thing.
Stealing a tiger and keeping it on your property. Probably not going to cover that.
Insurance is probably, intentional acts, right? That's a very high standard, but an intentional act, and what you're doing in your professional side. So, but basically anything else, classic example we all would think of, right, is the car, a car crash, right? A lot of times we really don't realize that our coverage can be pretty limited on what we cover for bodily injuries and property. So an umbrella policy will help cover that. Somebody gets hurt on our property. That's typically when we think about a lot too. So I tell every client, especially business clients, when we're having conversations about LLC incorporation, I'm always like, look, please do yourself a favor. Just go get personal liability protection to begin with. Insurance agents call it umbrella policy. These things are pretty cheap.
They are
for what the coverage that you get. I want to say $1 million typically runs around $200 or $300 maybe. It's just not an expensive thing to get. And so that, to me, that's always a tip I try to give.
Best advice I ever got on that is you do not have to be a millionaire to be sued for $1 million.
That's correct. That's right. Absolutely. And if you start thinking about what do I have to lose,
the answer is everything.
Yeah. Right. and so you can get, $1 million makes a lot of sense,
and if you are a small business owner, you already know people assume that you're, wealthy or whatever. And that's just not the case.
So that would probably be my number one tip. And I don't make any money on that one, but it's a good
advice.
Thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Talbott, Centerpoint Group Law Firm. Did I get it right this time?
Oh yeah.
There's our studio audience.
Nice,
Finally chiming in. Where you
Thank
been?
you.
Good
Thank you.
gracious.
Thank you, folks. It was really good. Really good being here today.
If you need any advice or help with that estate planning stuff, give my friend Tab a call. And also happens to be involved in all kinds of fun stuff around the community. So whenever you see him, just go up and give him a big old hug. He loves that. So,
I'm a hugger. I'm not opposed to that. So.
I like saying that to some people, and every now and then people will be like,
"Oh yeah,
don't touch me."
I know a few that. So, well, thank you for having me. It's fun. I know this is incredible topic to talk about. People love it. So
that's good stuff.
Yeah. So
it's important. It's important stuff.
Okay.
So
well, good.
All right. Thanks for watching. You guys have a great rest of the week. Talk to you soon.